Hi, everyone. Welcome to our dashboard training series. And this is, I think, the 5th one we've done so far. And so today we're going to do somewhat similar, but somewhat different than what we've done before. So some of these webinars have been on a module, which is something that you can add on to HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite that will do something specific, like wish list, shopping cart, and things like that. And some have been on functionality that you can build out on HandsOn Connect or LlamaSite, and leveraging Salesforce also that will do certain things, and like building forms and listings and things like that. So today we're going to combine these a little bit. So we're going to be focusing on dashboards still, and the idea of pulling data out for your user to see and view, to browse, and things like that. And also we're going to be showing you a little bit of the corporate module. So the corporate module is a module that we have that you can install at HandsOn Connect, and it will give basically it will give HandsOn Connect users a way to have corporate partners that they can go in and see basically their corporate engagement with you. And so the idea here is the corporate module gives you that portal that you can build on and do different things with it. So with that, let me switch the slide. Okay, so as I said, basically the corporate module is a HandsOn Connect add-on. I know that some of you use LlamaSite, which is very similar to HandsOn Connect. This is a module that works with HandsOn Connect, but I think the idea behind it could easily be built in LlamaSite and things like that. So, but basically allows your corporate partners to view their employee activities, company engagement metrics, download data, and request service projects. And so this is an easy way that if you have corporate partners, to allow them to log in, basically see how their employees are volunteering, and download the data just in case they have to upload it into another system, which they usually do, and also see some high-level metrics and other services that you want to provide. So some assumptions as far as what we're going to be covering, as far as what would be good to have in your background, is a basic understanding of HandsOn Connect and LlamaSite. If you're using any of those two products, you're in the right place. If a basic understanding of Salesforce and CMS from basic to medium, and maybe with some advanced tricks that we've done in the past that might come in handy here. So really what we're looking at is leveraging the products we have. Is how do we build more value and engagement into our portal for corporate partners and other parties, because you could easily do it for community partners and other types of partners or groups that you work with. So what are we going to be covering today? So we're going to do a quick recap of a dashboard that you and I built already, which is the donor dashboard that we built in the I think the first 2 webinars. We're going to look at the corporate module, and then we're going to look at this is more roll up our sleeves, more hands-on, is the summarizing data methods. How can we summarize data in Salesforce so that we can display it to a corporate partner, community partner, to our partner, to partner staff or partner portal users and things like that. How can we display this data to them? And so to be able to display data, we can display it to them as a list, a very detailed, or we can also summarize that data or aggregate it for them so that they can see higher level or top level metrics. And so we're going to be looking at a couple of methods, and then we're going to be looking at how we can display that, and different ways we can display it, which we've already done, especially when we did the donor portal dashboard. So let's look at the donor dashboard first, which is what we built in that first webinar. So what we did is we basically built a page that you can see there. So, and we did it from scratch. If you remember, if you haven't seen that, go to our YouTube channel, that will be listed there. But it basically shows you how to build this page from scratch. And so the idea here was to show donation metrics, which is what you're seeing at the top, some donation history, a chart, just to show off the chart, but you can see the chart at the bottom of the thumbnail there, and basically give them a mechanism to pay. So this is the page we built. And so what we ended up doing here, if you remember, is that we created 3 listing blocks. So listing blocks in HandsOn Connect and LlamaSite is basically a component that you can add that is really good at pulling data out of Salesforce and showing it to you in different ways. So with the listing block, you can show like these top level metrics up here. You can show list or a data table, which is list here. You can show a chart. You can also show it as a calendar. You can do pure HTML, so you can build out any way you want. So it gives you a lot of options of pulling data out of Salesforce and displaying it in some way. Now, if I look at this page, I have a couple of things going on. I'm going to first look at the middle block, the one that says my donations. So what this is showing me is the detail. It's giving me a list of all my donations, and just tells me the amount of each, how much I've received, the date, and so on. And then I have summary data at the top. It's summarizing, or it's aggregating data in different ways. So I basically have 4 types of data up here. I can summarize my data. I can aggregate it by counts. Okay, so and actually that's the one I don't have up here, so I don't know why I started with that one. But I could count how many donations I have. So if I come down here, I can see that I have 10 donations. It tells me right here. And if I wanted, I could repeat that up here. I could say number of donations, and that would be a count. I can also do sums. So a sum, what it means is, in this case, I'm not counting how many records I have here. I am summing a value in those records. So I can see what's the total donations, and I can sum all the amounts here, and that would give me these numbers up here. Or in this case, also sum of their lifetime, so over their whole lifetime. I also have a static metric here, which is really not necessarily a metric, it's just information. I'm really not summarizing anything, I'm just displaying, but you could look at this as a metric, because there is a metric called max and min that you could look at your highest donation, your lowest donation, or the highest date of the donation. So this is technically a metric. And then I have an average. So this is another way of summarizing data. So I'm not summing, I'm not counting, I'm not looking at the max, I'm not looking at the min, I want to know my average. So I'm averaging, I'm taking all these numbers and I'm just getting the average. So just in this little dashboard, we're summarizing data in a lot of different ways. We're also displaying it. So if remember that we're looking at how we're summarizing data and how we're displaying. So we're also looking to display it in different ways. So here I'm displaying it as metrics up here. Here I'm displaying as a list, and here I'm displaying as a chart. So this is my donations in a chart by year. And so it gives, and the reason I'm covering all this up front with this example, because hopefully many of you will remember this example, is that one of the key things about dashboards is understanding where your data is coming from, how you want to aggregate it, and how you want to display it. Okay, so those are really the 3 things that we're looking to do: is where it's coming from, how we want to aggregate it, and how we want to display it. So with this example, because we were in the nitty-gritty of this a couple months ago, hopefully it'll give you a better idea of how we're covering the next couple of things here. I'm not going to go into how this was built, because there's a whole video on this. So let me just jump ahead here. And let's talk a little bit about the corporate module. So the corporate module is very similar to the donor portal. And one of the really strengths of LlamaSite, HandsOn Connect, and especially working with Salesforce, is that these modules, these portals or modules, are fairly easy to use. The more complicated ones, the corporate module is a little bit of a trickier one. So we have it built out. There is a cost to it, and you could build it on your own too. But the idea is that we're giving you like a starter that you can start with a bunch of work done up front, and then you can customize or just use it the way it's out of the box. But the idea here is that a lot of these dashboards are very similar, and they're very tailored to your users. So that way, if you have something for your corporate partners, or you have something for your members, or you have something for your trainees or your sponsors or things like that, you can really customize their user experience or their user journey, how they interact with you, and hopefully that will add value, it would add engagement and whatever metric you're looking at. The more useful information we can give them, the more useful tools we can give our users, the more engaged they're going to be with the platform. And because we know that it's one size doesn't fit all, we would love to have these modules that you just installed, and we do, that you can start using them right away, but we also give you a lot of flexibility to customize them to make sure they're tailored to what you need. So the corporate module, similar to the donor module, instead of summarizing donations, it basically summarizes employee data. So it's going to have a dashboard, it's going to have listings, it's going to have, and then it's going to have two items that have very little to do with the dashboard. At least this is how it comes out of the box. It's going to have the ability to do service requests, and what that is that if a corporate partner or company is looking for a certain type of project for their employees, they might be looking for a project for 30 of their employees on a Friday that has team building activities, but it's also outdoors and things like that. They can post that request, and if you're a HandsOn Connect user, that will go to you. If you have partners, you can have it go to the partners for basically partners trying to provide a project for that, or if they have a project that exists already, they can submit that project for the company to review to see if it's a good match to them. And then the other thing is that you can post in HandsOn Connect, you can post projects suitable for companies, and it's actually the label I think is technically suitable for corporate groups. That's suitable for corporate groups, and what that will do is when the company logs into their module, they'll have a tab that they can see, like, oh, okay, these are all the projects that you're the partner or you have posted that I believe that are suitable for corporate groups, and so they can see them all in one place. So with that, why don't we take a quick look at the corporate module? Okay, so this is the corporate module. So when you first install it, this is how it looks. It will adapt colors and things like that to the styles that you have installed in HandsOn Connect, but these are the basic items it comes with. So similar to the donor module, you come in, you see some high-level metrics at the top, and so in this case, number of employees, hours served, dollar value, and engagements. You'll see that employees is really the only one that has a number, and that's actually somewhat on purpose because we're going to use the other three to look at ways we can aggregate that data. And when we get a little bit more into the weeds in a couple of minutes, we're going to figure out how is it that we come up with those numbers. Okay. And then so if you have a corporate partner, you've designated them as a corporate partner, you can designate contacts related to that corporate partner as admins. And so if they're admins, when they log in, they'll land on this page. And so they'll come in, this is the first thing they'll see, and they'll be able to see quickly their employees. These are the employees of this company, the hours they're served, the dollar value. This is basically just you can calculate this any way you want. This is just going off the standard 2023 rate that's for volunteer service. But we've done it for customers that's even more specific, like they will assign the value depending on the category or classification of that opportunity. So something to do with accounting might be a little bit higher value than an opportunity that is more like, basically at an event, at a registration table or something like that. So but the idea here is that if you wanted to provide this, you could provide to your corporate partners not only the hours they served, but some calculation that gives them some value. You could also do impact measurements so instead of dollar values, if you wanted to see numbers of trails, miles of trails cleared, or trees planted, or pounds of food distributed, or things like that, whatever you think is that is important for your corporate customers to stay engaged and to be able to use that data and also upload into our systems, that you can do it. You can also do a matching value if you want to just give them right off the bat how much you think, if they're matching, that way they know there. So, and I keep on going into, you can do this any way you want, because although this is a module, it's completely open. And what that means is you can go in and modify it. And also, because we're going to be looking in a couple of minutes of how to summarize data, then I really want to make sure that your mind is really open, that you can almost, as long as the data exists in Salesforce somewhere, you can summarize it and provide it through one of the portals. So employee activities is basically just another listing. This is your employees. You can download it to CSV. This is actually something we get quite a bit with corporate partners, and most of the time it's because they need to upload it to a system on their side. We also have what I mentioned earlier, the corporate friendly projects. These are the ones that are suitable for corporate groups. And so as you build out your opportunities, we would basically add to your page layout a checkbox that says suitable for corporate groups. And when you check that, it will show up here. It doesn't mean that they can't search the opportunities on your main site if you have that available to them, but this just narrows down what was probably most appropriate for corporate groups. And so when they click here, it's basically just going to take them to the opportunity detail page. And then then there's a section of service requests. So the idea here is that a company can post a request, basically, and they're really looking for an opportunity. Maybe they've searched your opportunities, they haven't found it, or maybe they haven't even bothered to search and they just prefer to do it this way. But the idea is giving them a mechanism that they can post what they're interested in, and in a fairly simple form, not asking a ton of questions, but maybe just enough. And obviously, you can add as many questions as you want to this form, but the idea here is that they would create a new request, they would give the request a name, they would give it a description. They have a status here. A lot of times the status is, when they submit this, it just goes in as new, and then you as the customer manages that status. Right now, we just expose it here. You don't have to give them all these options either. And then once again, all these pick lists is up to you what you want to have here, but maybe they're looking for a project and they don't really care if there's other groups there, or maybe they want a project just for themselves. So they would go, no, not open to our participants. They would say, okay, I'm looking for about 35 employees. And also the duration. So, the idea here is just to get a general sense of it. And this you will probably modify depending on the type of projects you have. Maybe you don't have anything under 6 hours, or maybe you don't have anything over 6 hours. So you could say an hour, 2 hours, or so there's an idea of the duration, and basically the period. So if it's for a specific date, then we give, maybe they're looking, I really need something for May 1st. If they're looking for something on a specific date range, so that it's between a certain date, so they're, maybe it's the whole month of June, or the second half of the year, or something along those lines. Or if it's just open, they're just, they're browsing, they're seeing what's available, and then once they have all the information, they'll decide which one works best for them, and then they can provide additional details. There's also a section that it's not activated here, but basically, if you want, there's a section that you can, if you want to let them do it by cities, by zip code, by neighborhoods, by different locations, or a specific location, or within a certain distance or something, you can also gather information about where they're looking to volunteer. So once they submit this, what ends up happening is that, depending on how you have this set up, is that, well, you will definitely, as if in HandsOn Connect, you'll definitely get notified that there's a request there, and there'll be an interface to match. If your partners if your partner staff partners, or your partners that are using the sharing portal, partner staff portal, you can enable it for them, so they'll have a section where they can see all these requests, and if they have an opportunity, they can say these opportunities match. Okay, once the opportunities match, then once these opportunities start being submitted as possible candidates to fulfill this request, then the corporate partner will be notified, and they can also come here and see if there's any responses. And as of now, there are no responses, but they could see all the opportunities here that are being proposed that might match this request. For the HandsOn Connect users, really, there's only a couple things that get added to HandsOn Connect. Obviously, the whole service request component gets added. There's also a checkbox in the volunteer opportunity that gets added so that you can mark them as suitable for corporate groups. And then there's in the contact, there's a drop down that gets added so that you can make a contact of a company, their corporate admin. So when they come in, they can see this page, because if they're not, they wouldn't be able to get to this page. So in a nutshell, that's the corporate portal. So let's look at this from this Salesforce side.
Right, there are a few questions.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I should have stopped and asked any questions. So yeah, go for it.
It says, can they see specific activities their employees are attending?
Yes. Well, yeah. So I mean, they can see. Let me see. And I don't think I added any data here. Yeah. Yes, they can. So what usually we do here is we make the list, and we do it by for the HandsOn Connect users. We basically show them the connections. So those are the activities they're attending. I don't have that view right now, but it is one that we put in quite often.
Awesome. And then Jake was asking if, assuming that the request form is customizable, so they could put in things they wanted to ask.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. How do you set access for corporate modules for each user? I think you mentioned that it was a field.
Yeah. So basically, you're going to have 3 main users of it, possibly 4, but you're going to have your corporate partner. And so what ends up happening is that you'll have an organization record for that partner. And usually we do this by record type, but we can also do basically a checkbox. This is a corporate partner. We work with you in how you want to manage that. But usually we do a record type for business or corporate, and then that way we don't have to have that much information as most of our especially the HandsOn Connect one has. And then, but the important thing here is that these corporate metrics get added here. So we add these to the page layout so you can see the summary of the corporate metrics. And then as far as how they access the corporate partner. So once someone is marked, an organization marked as a corporate partner, they technically have access to the portal. But the thing is, the access is managed at the user level. So these are all the contacts that are part of this, that are associated with this organization. So if I wanted to make Courtney, so when she logs in, she can see as a matter of fact, she goes straight to the corporate partner if you enable this. I would come down here, and where it says admin role, I would give them that corporate admin role. So what the system will do is when she logs in, she'll say, oh, she's a corporate admin for this organization, Flowers for Friends. And it'll take her straight to that corporate part. If she's a volunteer, she'll still have access to her volunteer portal and all that. The only thing is, instead of landing on the volunteer page, she'll land on the corporate portal. If she's also happens to be a partner staff, then I think she lands on the corporate page first. She still has access to the corporate portal, to the partner portal, and to the partner staff portal, and to the volunteer portal. I know I'm talking about a lot of portals here. Any other questions, Jenny?
There was another one, but I'm waiting for clarification on it. So
okay. Well, that was good, because one of the questions just had me walk through what I was going to cover, and part of what I was going to cover in the Salesforce side, that So you have organizations. The companies do need to have an account record in Salesforce, and contacts do need to have a login, obviously, so they can access and really, because a lot of your, I mean, employees could also be volunteers. The same employee who's doing the admin can do. Sorry, my dog just stepped on something here. But yeah, because so basically they can be a volunteer and a group admin. They can be a partner staff and a group admin. So you can combine them. They don't have to be exclusive one thing or another, and they don't have to open different accounts for the different roles. You can have multiple. You can have the same user have multiple roles, and they'll still have access to all the functionality that HandsOn Connect provides under those roles. Okay, so and then on the opportunity, really the only piece that we add is this checkbox here. No, that's the standard one. I don't think maybe we haven't exposed it as this one. Oh, here it is, suitable for corporate groups. So basically, when you create an opportunity, if you want it to show up on that list, then you just check this box, suitable for corporate groups, and it will show up on the list of any corporate partner that's showing up. They can quickly see it, see if it's a good match to them. And then the only other thing that we have is basically the requests, the service requests. That is just going to be a separate object, and so you'll see the service request, and then as they start matching up or have responses, they'll be in the related list under responses. So, any additional questions, Jenny? Because so I know that I showed you the corporate module relatively quick, but it's also a super simple module. Really, the main smarts behind it, to put it that way, is that, especially in HandsOn Connect, the hours and all the activity associated to a volunteer employee is really usually tied to the nonprofit or to your organization that's doing it. So you're tied to the partner and things like that. So for us to be able to pull that out and show it to a company, that's really where a lot of smarts is. And we do that different ways depending on what works best for you. So the main way of doing it is through the email address. So we ask employees to use their corporate email, and then we match up the domain of that email with the one of the corporate partner, and it can be more than one domain because we know that some companies use multiple domains. And so we match that up, and then that's how we determine that that's an employee of that company. Doesn't mean that we've confirmed it yet, but that's how we determine that it is. So as far as confirming that that's actually an employee, it's like some installations of this do it automatically. If the domain of the email matches, then we assume they're an employee, and they get counted as an employee. And remember, to create an account in HandsOn Connect, they have to get the confirmation email to their email and things like that. So it's very likely that if they used an email address with a corporate domain, that they actually do work for that company. But there's also processes of confirming that. So you can have the corporate admin confirm it. Basically, we put it in a queue and say all these folks have created accounts. They're associated with you by domain. Do you want to approve them? They approve them, and then they can be an employee. We can also do it by putting in some ID, some corporate ID, something along those lines that will work better. We can also do it picking the company from a list, which is usually we don't recommend, but we do have some folks that use that. And there's a list of companies, and they pick the list of companies. So we do have to associate the volunteer with the company to make so that we know they're an employee of that company, but there's different ways of doing it. And that's really the longest conversation we usually have with customers before installing the module, besides the customizations that we might do as far as what you want to capture in the service request, what you want to report back to the company in terms of metrics and impacts and things like that.
We do have another question that says, does the nonprofit partners, do they still need to verify the volunteer attendance status and hours for the corporate projects? Or can the corporate admins confirm the hours as well?
That's completely up to, that's really complete. For us, that's really, basically a volunteer management process. And so we would adapt it to what the process is. So here, if your existing process is that the nonprofit always has to confirm attendance, but but I do know of, I think all our implementations of the corporate module so far have given the corporate admin ability to do that, because it's usually them that they bring the volunteers and they leave with the volunteers usually. So I think in most cases, it's the corporate admin that's doing the attendance.
But it can stay with the original model and
yeah, it can stay. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. So let's look at summarizing data. So, like I said at the beginning, this is, we're using the donor portal and the corporate module kind of to get to this. And so one of the key things is that we know that when we put a module out there for you, or we build something custom, or when you build something custom with our tools, is that a lot of times there's data that you're going to show, and maybe what we provide is not exactly what you want to show. And so we would basically, what I'm going to go through is what we go through when we evaluate what you're asking, but this will give you a way of you doing it too. So when, like I said at the beginning, one of the first things you have to determine is where the data is coming from. And once you determine where the data is coming from, then you have to determine how you're going to aggregate it. Okay. So in this case, I'm going to use the corporate module as an example. The corporate module has basically three main objects. So for those of you who are familiar with Salesforce, object is basically like a data table or a group of related records. So it's the account, which is the organization. It's the contact, which is the volunteer or employee, and the connection, which is when a volunteer participates in an opportunity, a connection gets created, and that's where we track their hours. There's other objects that are really important, but not necessarily for what we're going to do right now. So there's the volunteer opportunities, there's occurrence, there's all these other things. But for what we're going to be looking at with the example I'm going to be doing, is that we're going to be looking at those three objects. Okay. And I'm going to jump ahead here because I know I have a little diagram here, is that when I'm looking at how I'm going to aggregate data, I have to understand the relationship of how that data is related. Now, in this case, I have a lot of options, because it turns out that when I'm in the easiest thing to really do is to identify the child object, which is basically the object that has the data that you need. Okay, so that's going to be identifying the source data. So we've talked so far about hours served per employee. That's tracked in the connection. We talked about number of engagements, which is basically number of connections. So that's also tracked in the connection. We've also talked about dollar value and although that's not tracked directly in the connection, it does depend on the number of hours, because you're going to multiply those hours by a dollar amount. So if we look at those three first, okay, all that data exists in the connection, so that's going to become my child object. That's where I'm going to be pulling data from. It's also called the source, where maybe the parent object is called the target, but we're going to use this parent-child idea here. So that's where my data is. And now I need to determine where is it that I want to show it. Okay. So if I go to my dashboard here, In this dashboard, I'm showing it in two places. I'm showing it here at the top, which is basically the data summarized at the organization level, okay? And then I am showing it down here that is summarized by the contact level, by each employee or each volunteer, because this is the number of hours for this volunteer, and this is the number of dollar value for this volunteer. And then up here, I'm summarizing by account. So if I go back to my little diagram here, which I moved off of, okay, I'm going to be summarizing data from the connection to the contact, and I'm going to be summarizing data from the connection to the account. Now, I said that a little bit slowly with some hesitation, is because I have a choice here. Actually, if I already have to summarize data from the connection to the contact, it means that I could also summarize all the whatever data I summarize in the contact. I could also summarize it from the contact to the parent. Okay, and it really makes no difference in terms of the actual number. They should be exact, no matter if you pull all the data from the connection directly into the account, that should work. And if you pull the data on a per contact or per employee basis into the contact, and then that summary data you re-summarize into the parent object, you should be fine. The decision really here is to start getting a little bit nerdy in that you might have 10,000 connections for 1,000 volunteers or for 1,000 contacts. So if you're pulling all the data directly into the parent account, into the account, then you're basically going to have to process 10,000 connections, which is a lot more than processing 1,000 contacts. And because you already had to do 1,000 connections to pull the data into the contact, you're doing 20,000 connections, as opposed to doing 11,000. The math is correct, but it doesn't matter. Okay, and so all in all, the only reason I'm showing is it's always nice to draw in a napkin or something where the data is going to go and where the data is and where it's going to go. Okay, so if all I did was start off with, okay, I have this object here, that's a contact where my volunteer data is. I have my account where my corporate account information is, and then I have my connection where my source data is. Then I know at least the things I'm working with. Okay. And I'm supposed to show you this one first. Basically, what you're looking at, what I said at the very beginning, is you have you know where your data is going to end up, and you know where your data is starting. Well, you know where your data is starting, you know where your subarray data is going to end. So you just have to figure out how that's related. And the reason that's important is because of this. Okay? Well, it's really important because if you don't know how it's related, then you probably couldn't pull the data, and your dashboards wouldn't be that interesting. But once you know that, then you decide what method am I going to use to summarize these. Some are easier, some are not. Some are are a lot of work. Some work in some situations but don't work in others, and things like that. So in terms of less customization to more customization, this is a little bit the order, right? So I'm going to go to Salesforce 1 second. So if I go to my organization here, these are the metrics I want. These are the metrics I'm summarizing. So total hours served, total dollar value, total connections, and total employees. So the first method, which is, it works, but it's it's a little bit of a drag, is to just update it manually. So basically once a day, once a month, once a week, or every hour, however, depending on how much energy you have, you would go to your connections, maybe create a report that will give you the totals, and then you would come in here and update them. So the minute you update them here, if let's say there was 200 hours served, I put 200 hours served, I would save this. And then when I came to my you'll see that it's there, 200 hours. Okay, it hasn't calculated the dollar value yet, but it put my 200. So that works. I mean, that's one way to have a dashboard and populate it, which is not much different than just creating a static CMS page and coming to the CMS page and just putting it here manually. The next method is actually the best one, but it doesn't happen that often. But it did happen when we built the donor dashboard. Okay, so it's like, whoa, that was easy because the data is already summarized for us. So this is, and the only reason I put this here is a lot of times we go into instances and we see someone who created, let's say for the donations, they created a custom field for total donations. And it turns out Salesforce already does it for you. So it's always worthwhile looking into if that data is summarized somewhere already for you. Because if it's there, then there's really nothing to do. So if we go to that dashboard, in the contact record, in Salesforce, if you have Nonprofit Success Pack or Nonprofit Cloud, and you're using opportunities and you're using it the way they hope that you will use it, then all the data up here is already available to you. In the contact record, they're already summarized. They already put in the average donations. They already put in the lifetime donations. They already put current year and previous year donations. They don't do it for every year, but they do have current year and previous year. That's why we conveniently just put in current year and previous year, because had we put in 2021 here for 3 years, Salesforce doesn't provide that. So we would have had to do a custom field and do some custom calculation to get that. And then they also happen to put in the last donation in the contact record. So there's a date field that gives you the last donation. So all that is provided. And Bryce, seems like I spent a lot more time on this one, but you have no idea how many times we've seen custom fields that are already there and there's no need to do it. And if you created a custom field for a data summary, it means you created a process to summarize that data. So it's not just adding the field, it's also adding that process. Okay, the next one is Salesforce Rollup. And so Salesforce comes with a type of field. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but basically it comes with a type of field that's called the rollup that allows you to summarize data from child objects, or what they call detail objects, into the master object. So, for example, the connection is a detail object or child object of the occurrence. So I could use a rollup to roll up information that way. But if it doesn't have that type of relationship, the master detail relation, which is a type of field, then you can't use a Salesforce rollup. But this is a super convenient way of doing it if you do have that master detail relationship. And interesting enough, sometimes you think it does have that relationship. For example, between contact and account, you would think that it has a master detail relationship because but it's not. It's actually, it's just a lookup relationship. And lookup and rollup are basically the same thing, except that master detail is more strict, but it also gives you some extra functionality. So if you don't want to do it manually, you weren't lucky in that someone already summarizes for you and you can't use a Salesforce rollup, there's a bunch of other ways you could do it. You could write Apex, you can do all these things, but we're just listing 2 of these that are pretty convenient to do. So one is to write a flow. It could also be a process builder or something like that, but don't do a process builder because they're being deprecated, so do a flow. Or you could use a third-party tool like Declarative Rollups, okay? And these do get a little bit nerdier in that you really do have to have some Salesforce shops to do this, but they're not necessarily complicated. So why don't we start with the flow. So right now, this is less about teaching you how to do a flow or teaching you how to do the Declarative. It's more about what you need to think about in doing these. So I set up these 2 flows already. I'm just going to walk through them, but I actually set them up wrong on purpose, okay? Because it's just to emphasize, they're not necessarily wrong. There's just a better way of doing it. So remember that you want to identify that child object or the source of the data and the parent, okay? So so important thing to understand about flows is that they get triggered by an object. So they get triggered when something changes in an object. So they get triggered when a contact gets edited or created. They get triggered if the connection gets created or the count or whatever you chose to trigger it. Okay, so you need to think a little bit ahead because, like I said, I did these two flows wrong. So these two top ones are the ones I built. So you see it says corporate metric aggregation on account, and if I open this one up, I came here and said, oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to check every time the organization is created. Okay, so I came in here, I selected organization, and then so this is not going to work at all, because usually when the organization is created, it has no employees, it has no connections, and this is the only time this will ever be triggered. Okay, I actually want it triggered. Technically, I don't even need it to be triggered when it's created, because I know everything's going to be 0 when it's created. So I really only need it when it's updated. You could do create it just to cover all your bases, but the truth is it's enough to do. It's probably better to do updated. It's something less that runs when that could go wrong when something is created. Okay, so I fix a really important problem, because this wouldn't summarize anything unless it was created, and it will always summarize 0 records. Okay, so now every time the organization is edited, so every time the organization record changes, this is going to trigger. Okay, and it's going to do something relatively simple. I know that flows is not everyone's cup of tea, or maybe you're not familiar with it, but the idea here is I'm just going to run through the flow here. So it's the organization record was updated. So now I'm going to go to get all the contacts associated with this organization, or all the volunteers, or all the employees. I'm going to loop through them, and I'm going to count them, because what I'm doing right now is I'm calculating the number of employees. Okay, and so because each contact is 1 employee, I can add 1 to it. Okay, so that would give me that. Now I'm going to do here quickly is I'm going to add another field, and I'm going to call that var for variable total, because it's a total, and this is just the way I write it. You can put anything you want here. Total, and I'm going to put dollar value. Okay, and then I'm going to, because that's dollar value, I'm going to make this a currency, leave it 2 decimal spaces, and I want this to be 0 if the default value. And the important thing here is that now I need to look for that value in all the contacts. So I happen to know it's dollar, so I'm going to put, here's the dollar value. So basically it's going to copy into this field all the dollar values in the contact. Okay, and so and a really important thing here is that you are summing it. So we want to add it. So every time it checks a new contact, we want to add it. So we're going to add it here. And notice that in this case, because it's not a count, it's a sum, I need to give it the value it's going to sum. In this case, I was just counting records. So I could have just put 1 there, and it's just, it'll add 1, then add another 1, and so on. And then what we need to do here is just tell it, okay, when you're done, update the correct records. So I'm updating the organization record. I'm going to update my dollar value here. I'm going to add my variable here. I'm going to save it, activate it, and next time the account gets updated, or the organization gets updated, this will trigger, and it will sum those 2 things up. So as you can see, it's a fairly basic flow, and I know flows can be intimidating and things like that, but this is a really easy way, relatively easy way to do counts. Okay. Now remember that I said this has another flaw. And this is where I really want you to think about, once again, this little diagram here. So what is changing the number of hours that are summarized in the account? It's not when anything changes in the account. It's when a new connection is added, or a new connection is updated. So let's say they went in, it had 2 hours, they updated to 2.5 hours. So now it went up by half an hour. I need to reflect that in the parent account. If all I was doing is triggering my flow when the parent account gets changed, it wouldn't record that. So flaw number one here is I'm triggering it off the organization and not the child object. Okay. Furthermore, if you look at what, so I could have triggered it off the contact, but that would have been not as bad as doing it from the organization, but the contact probably gets updated more than the organization, but it would still have the same problem. So really what I would want to do here is trigger this off the connection. So you want to trigger it off, usually off the child, okay? And usually, usually, it depends. Well, it depends on what you're doing, because the next thing I'm going to say is going to contradict this, but usually as quickly as possible. Okay. So this is a great way of doing it. Every time the record is updated, I'm going to sum this up, and then and the record that needs to be updated is not the organization but the connection. So I should really rewrite this. Okay, I'm looking at the time, and I'm not going to go to that part of the webinar because I can see I'm running late already. But think of that first. When you do a flow, think about what really needs to trigger it. The second thing is how often you want this to run. Okay, the flows you can like here you can do it every time the record is updated, but it does add processing to every time a connection gets updated, or every time that contact, or updated. And you're also creating a point of failure that could that something could fail as you're trying to save a record. And you have to think, is it worth it to introduce that point of failure to gather this data now? Okay, and so for metrics, usually the answer is no. Okay, if you're wondering. So there's a couple of other things you can do. One is you can create another type of flow, which is called scheduled, which will run. You can run it just every morning. So yes, your data won't be updated live. It won't be to the next day that the data is there. You could create multiple flows, and you could create 24 flows and update it every hour if you wanted to, or six or 4 every 6 hours or something like that. So there's a couple of things you could play around here, but we highly recommend that for when you're doing a flow, especially for gathering metrics, you don't do it record triggered. Okay? It's just it slows things down, and you introduce a point of failure that if that fails, the capture of the data, which should be more important to you, is at risk of failing too. Okay, so the next thing is, okay, so what if I really did want it live all the time? Okay, and I'm going to have to leave you here with a cliffhanger for the next, and it wasn't designed this way because I was intending to cover that, is that this is where you can come in and use a third-party tool, which happens to be free. And by the way, if you did use Salesforce Rollups, those you can do live. And so if you can do Salesforce Rollups, or if someone already does it live for you, then you don't have to worry about this. But it's only if your only 2 options left are Flow and Declarative Rollups. Like I said, there are other options out there, but the ones we're presenting here is that, and I'll make sure I start off with Declarative Rollups in the next webinar. But one of the great things about Declarative Rollups is it's a free tool. It's supported by Salesforce. I actually think it's part of Salesforce now. And then, so I'm just going to show it to you really quickly. So the nice thing about Declarative Rollups is it's an interface that you put information in on how you want to roll up your data. And once you put all that information in there, you can run it real time, which it will do it every single, it will update it immediately, but it won't do it with the flow. It actually goes create a job and an Apex and all that stuff. So it's very, very efficient. It's like as if a coder had done it for you. And so the idea here is that if you really need real time, you should definitely probably look at this tool, or if you have very large sets of data, because there are limitations with flows. It only does 2,000 iterations and things like that. So if you have large sets of data, flows will probably start failing, or if not fail immediately. So you definitely want to look at a higher tool. And this is a great compromise because this does a really good job and you don't have to program any of the more advanced components or languages of Salesforce. And so I will cover this next time. Like I said, I didn't plan to have a cliffhanger, but now I do, and I like it. So with that, and I don't know if there's any questions, I'm happy to stay, answer some questions.